Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Needy No More, the podcast dedicated to healing the anxious attachment style. I'm your host, anxious attachment style coach and author, Chris Ratcliffe. I've helped thousands of people across 6 continents to end the cycle of anxious attachment through my books, workshops, digital downloads, and coaching program. I'm excited to carry on that mission here in the podcast, sharing tools and techniques, principles and practices for you to explore on your journey to growing more secure. Welcome back to the show, everyone. It's really exciting to dive into my very first guest interview today with none other than Jessica De Silva. Jessica De Silva is a licensed mental health therapist and attachment coach who empowers individuals to free themselves from attachment patterns that sabotage their relationships by teaching them actionable skills to relate to themselves and others more authentically and effectively. Not only does she talk the talk, but she also devotes her online platforms to sharing her personal journey in becoming securely attached and making these topics more relatable and encouraging. Jessica is also the host of the Let's Talk Attachments podcast. So for those listening, you may have heard an episode or more of Jessica's show because I've been on the show twice before. So without further ado, want to welcome you to the Needy No More podcast, Jessica.
Thank you so much, Chris. I am so excited to be here. Obviously, I'm used to kind of having guests come onto my podcast. So being in the spotlight is not my element, but for you, I knew this was going to be a very just comforting and natural environment. So thank you so much for having me.
You are more than welcome, and thank you for the kind words. I'm a words of affirmation person, so I really appreciate that. Great note to start on. So the first thing I wanted to ask you, just to introduce you to my anxious attaching audience, is so you're a therapist, you're a licensed mental health professional, you're also an attachment coach. How did you decide to specialize in attachment theory? There's a lot of different directions and specializations that you could have selected, and this is what you went with. So what informed that for you? How did that happen?
Yeah, good question. So I have always been intrigued by the world of psychology because I always had a desire to want to understand myself, right? Coming from a very chaotic, enmeshed household, everything felt so confusing, right? And so you identify and personalize everything that happens to you. And then when I took, I think it was like it wasn't even a psychology class in high school, it was some like life skills class. And
Interesting.
yeah, and I learned a little bit about psychology and like what's your ideology and just it was interesting to kind of understand, okay, wow, there's other implications to the way that I'm feeling. It's not just necessarily me, it's just kind of what I've been brought up with, it's the conditioning I've experienced in my life. So that opened up this whole world into psychology. Obviously, I got my bachelor's and then I got my master's in marriage and family therapy. And then with attachment coaching, I actually didn't learn so much about attachment science in grad school. We like barely touched on it. I read the book Attached like a few years
Right.
later, as most
Right.
people do when they learn about attachment science. And I realized, wow, holy moly, I finally understand all of the toxicity in my relationships. It all makes sense. And for me, I understand things through systems, right? And not necessarily labels per se, but I like to kind of see how things work kind of systematically to make sense of my behaviors. And so it just made sense. And I dove really deep into it and started sharing it on platforms and realized, wow, a lot of people resonate with this too, and they want to learn about it. So I just decided to niche in it.
Look, my story is so similar to that. It's honestly a little bit uncanny. And this is why in Needy No More, the book, the very first chapter after the introduction is called The Discovery. Because for me, discovering my own attachment style really gave me the power to recognize that it was conditioning. It's so easy to blame yourself when you grow up in a chaotic, unstable environment that's really unpredictable and you don't really know how people are going to show up or not. And so you just learn to take it all in and personalize it and it becomes a part of your identity. And recognizing and kind of individuating away from that and seeing, you know what, there was a me before that happened. And because it happens in childhood, we don't really have that identity yet. There's the kind of discovery of the label, but then there's also the rediscovery of yourself. And then that opens up a whole doorway into a new universe, really, of finding out who am I really without this identity, and what does it mean for me to be more secure? Tell me a little bit about your journey to grow more secure, because in your bio too, you talk about, how you want to share relatable things that help other people to understand they're not alone in this. And I like to do the same thing. So I'd love to hear more about your own journey with developing a secure attachment style.
Totally. And it actually makes me think of your first book, isn't it? It's Good to See Me Again.
Yes, good memory.
Thinking about that earlier today. And it's exactly that, Chris. It's just reconnecting to yourself. So obviously, with the anxious attachment, as you know, we get so lost in other people, right? We get so lost in our attachment figures. And so we never really had the opportunity to truly connect to ourselves and really get to know, well, who am I authentically without this conditioning, without these belief systems, without these, expectations? Who am I? What do I like? What do I value? And so, going back to my relationships, I would just always get so lost and consumed in my relationships, and I would just completely lose my autonomy because I never felt truly safe being my own person. I just never felt safe with that. This whole process of learning to become more securely attached, it all starts with your relationship to self, right? Often people come and they're like, I want to learn how to be secure in my relationship with my partner. And, they're like, should I even do this? A lot of people are like, do I even do this attachment coaching work if I'm single? And I'm like, yes, if you're single, this is the most epic time to do this work because it's such a good opportunity for you to develop and cultivate that healthy relationship with yourself.
Amen. Yes. And I say similar things to folks who reach out to me for coaching too, because there's no wrong time to do coaching work. Some folks are in relationships and are really struggling. They don't feel safe. They don't feel secure within themselves. And many folks will project that onto their romantic partner and within their romantic relationship. So yes, it's helpful to try to alter or evolve that dynamic. Obviously, it takes two to tango. You never know what's going to happen there. But when you change the nature of your relationship with yourself, other people do tend to respond differently. And that's important for people to hear too, because if you're on the insecure side of the attachment spectrum, you are hypersensitive to other people's energy, but other people are also responding to your energy as well. Now, I've been very upfront that I struggled with anxious attachment specifically for many years. I know that you've also been very transparent that you've struggled with a fearful-avoidant or disorganized or anxious-avoidant attachment style. So for folks who are listening, if you can walk them through exactly what that attachment style is and help them understand it and how it might relate to the anxious one, I think that would be helpful for folks.
So with the disorganized attachment or, the fearful avoidant, it's like you said, there's a combination of anxious attachment and the avoidant attachment. So it's really unpredictable and inconsistent when you're in your anxious state and when you're in your avoidant state. And I think it really also does depend on who you're with. So, if you're with someone who's a bit more anxious, we tend to go into our avoidance and vice versa. Now, the difference between someone who's disorganized versus someone who just has anxious and avoidant tendencies is often historically the attachment trauma that you experienced. So with disorganized attachment, there was just a lot more, I would say, like macro levels of trauma. So, just a lot more chaos, often a lot of different types of abuse, severe abuse. So it really leaves the child very conflicted where they feel as though, okay, my parent or my attachment figure is a source of safety, but they're also a source of fear, right? There's a lot of fear there that I have towards them too. So it leaves them this very disorganized state of wanting connection and wanting attachment, but simultaneously really being afraid of it at the same time. So we develop a lot of beliefs around my partner doesn't have the best intentions. They're the enemy. They want to take advantage of me. They're going to hurt me. So it's not just like, oh, okay, I don't trust this person. We really do think that we're in danger sometimes. So I would say that my attachment was disorganized, leaning more anxious, for sure. So, yeah. And so I would get into relationships, of course, right? Because we're repeating these patterns that were also abusive. So there was a lot of like emotional abuse, obviously verbal abuse. I was in one relationship that was physically abusive.
Oh my goodness.
And yeah, and just, when it happens, it's familiar to you. It's familiar territory. So you think that, oh, okay, I deserved that. He's only going to do it once, right? I can excuse that because that's what you did with your parents. I
Yeah.
love them, and really it seems like they love me and they should have good intentions for me, but they keep hurting me. And so that's just kind of how you view love, as it's pain, but it's mixed with love. So it's this very twisted and distorted way of experiencing love. So when I learned about attachment science, kind of all made sense that, wow, this is why I keep repeating these patterns.
Yes, you're speaking the gospel. First of all, I just want to say I love how you call it attachment science. I usually call it attachment theory, but I might actually change what I say moving forward because I think it's important for people to understand that this is studied and has been for decades and is a branch of psychology that looks at how the experiences that you've been through, especially traumatic ones, shaped your relational model. And what you were talking about in terms of repeating patterns speaks directly to that. The nervous system always seeks out a familiar hell over an unfamiliar heaven. We just repeat things because we want to repair them. And we tend to use relationships to try to do that without realizing that we've inserted the same character with a different name into the plot here.
Yes, that is correct. So go into this recent ex, because I'm sure we're going to dive into this.
Mm-hmm.
I thought that I was breaking the pattern, Chris. For a long time, years, I thought I was breaking the pattern because he wasn't physically abusive.
Mm-hmm.
He wasn't verbally abusive. And I would say he wasn't necessarily, I mean, I guess there was some emotional abuse that I just wasn't seeing as emotional abuse. So it was very subtle, I would say. But to me, I was like, cool, I'm in the clear. Like, I did it. I'm in the clear. And what I recognized is after the breakup and working with my own trauma-informed therapist, I realized that, wow, Jess, you were in codependent patterns and you didn't even know it. Like, you did not even know it. So it's really, really interesting just how ingrained this stuff is within us, like how ingrained our attachment styles are within us. So yeah.
Well said. Well said. And I do want to dive into that relationship. For
Yeah.
people watching or listening, Jessica has been so vulnerable in posting about her breakup with her ex. I think you were together 6 years, 7 years?
Almost 7 years.
Almost 7 years. And you're, I want to say, like a year and a half or maybe a little longer out of the relationship now?
A year and a month, two
A year and a
months.
month.
Yeah.
Okay. Yep. I knew it was a little over a year, but I wasn't sure exactly where we were on that timeline. So she's a little over a year removed from a pretty major breakup in her life. And she's posted really inspiring videos about how she's cried it out
Mm-hmm.
and walked on the beach and leaned into her relationship with, I think, your sister and family and friends and rediscovered joy again in the wake of a pretty devastating breakup. I mean, almost 7 years is a significant chunk of
Yeah.
someone's life, of your life. And that's really, really tough. So I want to kind of set the stage for folks to understand this was a long-term relationship. You may or may not have even talked about marriage and other things. You know, when you're together that long, like you talk about stuff, like long-term stuff, big commitment, milestone type stuff. So to end a relationship like that and to also talk very openly about repeating some patterns is, I think, really, really helpful for people to hear, because I can hear the self-forgiveness, the self-compassion, the grace that you are giving yourself in not beating yourself up, which as insecure attachers, formerly insecure attachers, we can tend to do. It's very deeply rooted programming within us to say, there's something wrong with us. I should have known sooner. Why didn't I leave earlier? Talk all of us through how you decided that ending or leaving the relationship is what was the best course of action for you. Because in our last conversation on your podcast, on the Let's Talk Attachments podcast, we touched a little bit on this, where you referenced that you really tried very hard. You leaned in, you then gave a ton of space and were basically living a separate life. So I'm going to pause there because I don't want to tell the story for you. But walk us through the whole process, really, of how you decided to walk away, because that's really tough to do.
Yeah, it was devastating, and I appreciate those kind words. It was devastating. I met him when I was 28 years old, and I was ready. I was ready to find a person, find a partner, get married, do the whole thing. Did I want to have kids? Not necessarily. I'm still like, is that something that I want in the future? I don't really know at this point. So I don't necessarily have that pressure or had that pressure. So I was really willing to kind of take my time with this relationship. And when I say we were on a trajectory, Chris, like we were on a trajectory. We bought a house, we were converting that house. It was an airplane hangar that we were converting into a home. I mean,
Wow.
we had to, yeah, we were building a bathroom together. We were building walls together.
Picking out tile.
Everything. And I noticed during those times, it was hell.
Wow.
It was hell. And I just, investing so much money and time already, moving to a different place, not knowing anybody, kind of feeling isolated. As anxious attachers, we go all in. Like we put everything, which I admire that about us, that we really go all in within relationships. But I had invested so much and I just kind of kept justifying the hell that I was experiencing in terms of this house project and telling myself it's just circumstantial. It's just circumstantial, right? His behaviors, his rage, his anger, his tantrums. It's just circumstantial. It's just circumstantial. So kind of, and it wasn't all the time, but it was really immature behavior on his part where it didn't make me feel necessarily safe. It wasn't ever geared towards me. So I thought, okay, I'm safe. He's just angry. He's just throwing tantrums, but it's not towards me. So I'm okay.
How long did it take before it was directed at you?
It was, and here's the thing that's tricky, right? Because when I say the emotional abuse, it was never verbally directed at me. So I thought, okay, maybe this is safe. But the emotional manipulation was, if he's unhappy, I'm a contributor to that, right? So if we need more money, well, Jessica, you need to make more money. Right? If we need to do XYZ, well, Jessica, you need to work harder. And so it was always this indirect accusatory language, right? Or just this indirect guilt that I would take upon myself. So again, it wasn't direct, but it was indirect. And what happened is, and during this time, Chris, as you know, needy no more, right? When you're doing this work, you learn to become very in tune with your feelings and needs. So I always practice just checking in. Hey, Jess, what are you feeling? What are you needing? What are you feeling? What are you needing? And I did that enough times to recognize, okay, wait a second. I am not feeling good most of the time. And the hard part is that, with circumstances, whether it was the house or for your listeners, whether the circumstances you have kids, right? The circumstances is that, you're working extra jobs because you're trying to pay the bills. Like there's always circumstances that can kind of skew your perception of reality.
Yep.
And once we finished the house, like I was painting, I literally broke my back doing this house. I was painting the flooring, everything was set, everything was good, and I realized, wow, I feel the exact same. So it was never a circumstantial issue. It was a personal and relational issue. And I realized, wow, we're actually very incompatible and you're just not emotionally where I need you to be. This isn't going to work. Yeah.
That's tough. That's really tough. I'm sure there were a lot of conversations along the way too. Hey, this is how I'm feeling. How are you feeling? How did those go? Like, what would he say to you in those moments?
So that's another thing, Chris, that was really, it was confusing because in my past relationships, my partners were always very dismissive or critical, right? I would bring things up and they would just make me feel bad about myself. The thing is, my ex, he never made me feel bad about it. He always listened. Like he was always a good listener. He held space for me. But the thing is, the words didn't align with the actions, right? He was
That's almost
very
worse.
yeah, right? Yeah. So the words, he was very affirmative, very encouraging, but did the actions, because what I needed was support. I needed more support. And he just could not provide me that support. He didn't really make an effort to meet my needs in the way that I needed.
That's so tough. I don't know why, but Kelsey Ballerini is like popping into my head. I'm
Oh,
thinking
me too.
of that song Mountain with a View or something like that. It's a really wonderful song about how she basically was alone like in this restaurant, and she even says in the song like, I realize this is when it's over for me. When did you realize it was over for you?
I was on a beach.
Oh my goodness. Okay. Okay. What beach? Where were you?
I was on a beach in Marina Del Rey. I live in Marina Del Rey now. I was on a beach. So here's the thing, too, is that, and I'm sure you probably know of this too, these feelings that I was experiencing, it manifested as depression. It manifested as like this consistent anxiety. So I was on the beach in Marina Del Rey and I just wanted to die. Like, I didn't want to be alive. I didn't want to be alive. I felt so stuck. And this was a similar feeling that I felt with the abusive ex. So I was like, what is going on here? Like, I'm not being abused now, but why do I feel so depressed and so drained and like just stuck in my life? And so, the depression, it's communicating to us. Your feelings are communicating to you. And so I realized, I honestly, Chris, I didn't really have an option at that point. It was like, this is the only thing that's causing me this amount of stress. I think I need to end this relationship. And as soon as I did, that day, I drove to Colorado 14 hours, had the conversation with him. Obviously, we cried a lot, but for some reason he understood because I would cry every week to him. This wasn't new information. Like this was ongoing. And the very next day drove back to California. And when I tell you like the amount of relief that I felt, it was insane. The relief that I felt, the weight that I could just take off, that I don't have to carry this burden of him anymore. I don't have to save him anymore. I don't have to take care of his happiness. I don't have to be responsible for this human's life anymore. It was just, whew, it's been a very difficult year, but the relief was just proof that I made the right decision and that the depression was telling me, hey, girl, you got to make some changes here because this isn't working.
Well, good on you. I mean, for listening to your own emotions. Obviously, there had been a lot of rounds of this for you, going to him, expressing your feelings, trying to work on the relationship, hearing one thing, seeing another. And I think it's important for folks to hear and understand that it's okay to keep trying. But if you realize that more often than not, you're the one trying to save the relationship and you're the one putting in the effort and you're the one paying the price, that you might not be in the right connection for you. There are degrees to all of this, and that's what makes it very challenging to leave at times too, because I'm sure there was a lot of good in the relationship. It's never all bad and it's never all good. It's somewhere in between. And realizing that your system was telling you, I don't feel like this is adding to my life more often than not, that more often than not you felt drained, depressed. Sounds like maybe there was even some suicidal ideation, which I want to normalize, by the way, folks. It's okay if you think about doing that. But if you start planning something, that's when you know you've reached a tipping point and you need to reach out for resources. So please know that it's okay to think things. You are not your thoughts. And I think it's really beautiful that you shared that, because there have been times where I've had thoughts like that too. And not enough people talk about getting to that point and feeling so depleted and maybe so stuck in maybe even like a freeze state of the nervous system, like losing yourself, not knowing what to do next, feeling a sense of confusion, feeling stuck. Seems like a lot of that was present for you. And I hope that there's someone listening to this who's struggling, to maybe leave a relationship that's not good for them and that they feel stuck in, like they can't leave, and that you've inspired them to hopefully pursue a healthier path for themselves. It's going to
Yeah,
touch a lot of people to hear that. I know.
I
It
hope so
touches
too.
me to hear it.
Yeah, and I love what you said too about all relationships have good. Like they all have good to it. You wouldn't be in that relationship with that person if there wasn't any good, right? So, and I think a lot of people too kind of get stuck on the good that they let that kind of overcompensate for all the bad and all the pain that's going on. And so just because there's good doesn't necessarily mean that the relationship is good for you. And it doesn't necessarily mean that that person is really compatible with you. And so that good, right? Because he is a good human. I truly, truly believe that he is a good human. But was he compatible with my needs, my emotional needs? No, he wasn't. And so, again, like my feelings were kind of indicating that to me. And the more that I communicated, hey, this is what I'm needing in the relationship, and it wasn't being, really respected in any capacity, to be
Hmm.
totally honest. The
Yeah.
words were there, the actions not so much. I realized, okay, I need to have more self-worth here, and I have to have more belief that I can find what I am looking for, and this just might not be it, and that's okay. Like that's okay.
It is okay. And intermittent reinforcement is the toughest pattern to break because you really don't truly know if or when the next turnaround is going to be, or if or when that person is going to show up differently, or hopefully you'll regain that honeymoon period that maybe you once had and the ease with which you were able to connect at the beginning. Many people are trying to recapture an era or a chapter in their relationship that no longer exists. And for some people, you're not going to be able to recreate that. And that is also okay. You can reformulate and create a new path for your relationship. But it always takes two. It takes both people to say, you know what? I'm not happy with this. I'm not happy with this. I think that this is how we can improve this dynamic. What do you think about that? What are your suggestions? Working as a team. It feels like, in a lot of ways, you were showing up for both people in the relationship. And in that regard, it can almost feel like you're working with someone who is a project and not a partner. That's
Yeah.
tough.
Yeah, that is tough. And I think that us anxious attachers, or those of us that lean a bit more anxiously attached, that we have like the capacity to do it all. I really do think we
Yeah.
have the capacity to do it all, but we don't have to. Like that's what we have to recognize, is that we don't have to take on that burden, and it's not our responsibility to make other people happy, and we have to prioritize ourselves. And so in this season where I've been single this year and 2 months now, it's been a season of just prioritizing myself, which Chris, I'm interested with you too, because have you been single? Have you been single for a while? Okay.
I have. Yes.
I'm curious about that. But yeah, it's been a season of just serving myself, which I'm not used to doing that, because as anxious attachers, we're used to serving others, right? Putting others first. So working through my own belief systems of, oh my God, am I being selfish? Am I self-centered? Like, should I be doing more for others? I don't know. It's been a very confusing time, but I think it's also a very necessary time to kind of reframe these insecurities and connect to my authentic self.
How have you been doing that over the past year plus? Like, I think I've seen some travel. Obviously, I've seen some family time, some friend time. I think I may have even seen some rollerblading and things like that, which is so LA to me, being on the East Coast. So talk to me and walk us through what your healing and grieving process have been like, because we all know that breakups cause grief.
Holy
How have
moly.
you been grieving?
Oh my gosh. So the first month, it was great relief. The first month, it was great relief. I was just on cloud nine, to be totally honest. I mean, it was hard, but I was just relieved. And then it went into a lot of loneliness, a lot of loneliness. But in that space, just really trying to reconnect. So, like you said, did the rollerblading. I have a nephew, so I would spend a lot of time with my little nephew, and just that met my need for, connection and presence and playfulness. I got back into my spirituality. So, practicing my Christian faith and reconnecting to God and like feeling really supported in that way. A lot of
Yes.
self-help books, therapy, coaching. I mean, the things, just trying to occupy my life the best I could. But I want to be totally honest, I want to say the first 6 months, it was just crying like every single day. I would like sing songs to my ex. Like I would be laying down in my bed and like singing songs and crying at the same time. And it was weird. It was very weird. I do a lot of yelling. I'd go into my bathroom and yell into the towel, just to like release all of this anger that I was feeling. So when I think about the 5 stages of grief, the denial was there here and there. There was definitely a lot of anger that came up, but I found myself in the bargaining stage a lot. So like as someone who kind of struggles with the anxious attachment too, I think that we get stuck in the bargaining stage of, oh my God, I could have done more.
Mm.
I could have done more. I could have waited a little bit longer. Maybe now that things were settled with the house, things were going to get better. Maybe I quit too soon on him. Maybe he was going to be happier after a new job, right? Like all of these different thoughts kind of bombarding me in terms of maybe I should have done more. To be 100% honest, I'm still struggling with that, not to the severity that I was before, but it still crosses my mind. I think I've reached a level of acceptance at this point, but you know, breaking those codependency habits, it's hard. Those codependent habits of wanting to fix someone and wanting to save someone and feeling like you could do those things for somebody. It's very much ingrained in how you're kind of wired to experience love. So that still does come up a little bit for me.
Thank you for being so transparent about that. There's so many degrees to all of this and shades of gray where, yes, there is an element of acceptance, of course, but it's not absolute acceptance. There's an element where you might question yourself or doubt yourself, ask what if, or be in a state of the woulda, coulda, shouldas.
Yeah.
And what I think is so essential for people to take away from this is that it's okay for those thoughts and feelings to be present. And it's still, I don't want to speak for you, but it still probably doesn't make sense for the two of you to get back together because you've recognized that there is a high degree of misalignment in some key areas for you.
Mm-hmm.
And it is okay for all of this to exist simultaneously. It's okay if you miss them, even if it wasn't healthy for you. It's okay if you're still sad or angry or upset or regretful or remorseful. It's okay for you to feel all of those things and still experience, still access a state of acceptance by saying, you know what, I needed to learn some things again. And I also went through that to recognize that, yes, maybe some of this was conditional, maybe some of it was situational, but overall, across a lot of different data points that you gathered over a good amount of time, you realized this probably isn't the person for me. And all of those things can exist simultaneously. That kind of gray area makes it very confusing for folks when they're going through a breakup. So I love that you acknowledged the nuance and the complexities of what it's like to grieve, because you're not going to absolutely accept. There's relief. I mean, I felt relief when my dad passed, and that's because he struggled with his health for half of my life. And so realizing that he was at peace and quite frankly, that I didn't have to keep caregiving was a big deal for me. I've experienced relief in breakups before myself as well. A breakup that I initiated, I remember feeling this way. There's also an empowerment that comes from that. Being on the more anxious side of things, it can be really challenging to be the one to say, you know what, I can't give anymore. I've reached my limit and this isn't healthy for me to continue. And as tough as it is, because we fear abandonment and we do feel a lot of isolation and loneliness, which is compounded by societal and cultural factors, especially now. But I love that you're talking about the nuance of all of this because it's so important for people to see that. There are so many degrees to the grieving process. And it's not linear. The 5 stages are not linear. Like any healing journey, it's a cycle. And you cycle upwards, you get more perspective. You might cycle back to revisit a lesson or cycle up and see it from a different perspective. And that is all a natural part of the healing journey. If you could give anyone struggling in their relationship or considering ending their relationship a piece of advice, something that worked for you, a tool, a practice, what would it be?
So someone struggling to kind of end their relationship in a sense?
Yes.
Okay. I would say, ooh, that's a really good question. I would say, again, to really check in with yourself often. What was really helpful for me was checking in again with the feelings and the needs on a more consistent basis. Because that's going to be really telling, right? Like that's a pattern that you want to pick up on. So I would, and again, it's like, and I know that you speak to this too, where it's not going to be perfect, right? No one's going to be able to meet your needs perfectly all of the time, but you want to be feeling pretty safe and secure and good about your relationship for the most part.
More
So
often than
more,
not.
yeah,
Yes.
more often than not. So if you have made a habit of kind of checking in with yourself and you're noticing, okay, wow, I'm actually feeling really anxious most of the time, despite my efforts to communicate, despite my efforts to make the relationship healthy. I'm feeling really disconnected and really distant and really unsupported and really unhappy and really sad and really alone. You want to listen to that. You definitely want to listen to that. So that check-in really allows you to begin trusting yourself a bit more because that self-trust piece is so, so vital.
The opposite of uncertainty isn't certainty, it is self trust. Yes, because there's so much around you you can't control. But if you're listening to yourself and what your nervous system and your body are telling you, there's so much pride in that and empowerment in that. And I imagine for you looking back at doing that for yourself in that era of your life, which is, first of all, so challenging to do because for folks like us, we're drawn externally. That is the focus. So, what you're also teaching folks in that moment is how to show up as a secure attacher, to listen to yourself, to advocate for your needs, to detach and recognize that, okay, someone isn't going to be able to meet my needs all of the time. They're not some sort of needs ATM, and you can make a withdrawal whenever you want. But even doing all of that, you recognized, well, I mean, I'm doing all of the secure, healthy things. So I imagine, too, there's an element of pride and empowerment in looking back at that. Have you considered that for yourself?
Not necessarily, not in that way.
Yeah,
Not
I
in
hear
that
that.
way.
Well, I'm
Um,
proud of you. It's tough to do in those moments. And,
yeah,
it's the last thing that folks like us tend to do when we're in that kind of dynamic in a relationship. I think
yeah.
you should be proud of
Well,
doing that in that moment and checking in with yourself and listening
yeah.
to yourself.
And I'm glad you said that, Chris, because, in the beginning of the episode, you mentioned how when having that kind of insecure attachment style, we can be really hard on ourselves in terms of, I should have done more. I should have known better. I should have listened to this and that. Um, yeah, I should have known better, essentially. I think that's been coming up for me a lot. But then I also, like, when I think about like my secure self, and I really did want to give it my all. Like, I gave it my all. And I'm proud of that. I'm really proud of that because I think I would have, in my avoidant tendencies, maybe I would have given up a lot sooner. And I didn't want to act from that space. I wanted to really give it a fair shot. So I waited until the end of this house project, right? To really see again, when the dust settles, how do I
Literally,
feel?
yes.
Yes. Yeah. And given the work that I was doing throughout those years and recognizing those patterns, I realized, okay, I see the pattern now, and I'm going to have to make a well-informed decision for my life from here.
What I also love about your journey and your story is that I see this all the time in the people that I talk to, and maybe you do too. There's so much judgment from an anxious attacher's perspective of someone avoidant and or disorganized. And what you are showing people is that not all disorganized attachers, avoidant attachers are the same. Look at how you leaned into your relationship. You didn't dismiss your avoidant tendencies, you recognized it and you made a more conscious decision. And this is why I always tell folks, don't rule out someone because of their attachment style. Look at the person, not the label. There's so much security in the way that you showed up there that if someone from the outside were to just look at you for being a disorganized attacher, they would lose all of that context. They would throw the baby out with the bathwater, so to speak. It's kind of all or nothing. That kind of all or nothing thinking is not healthy and not helpful and not secure. And I love this because it shows people, okay, so you've struggled with both sides of the spectrum here of being hyper independent, hyper dependent to the point of codependency, and yet you made healthy choices in those moments in the thick of the struggle of your relationship. And people need to hear that too. Don't rule out someone because of their attachment style. There are secure elements to everyone. For some, there are more than others, and that is okay. Remember that all of this is a spectrum. There's a lot of nuance to this. Look at the person and not the label. Because if someone were to look at you or me based on our attachment styles, and I know that both of us would likely consider ourselves more secure now. I've always said now that I consider myself about 75 to 80% secure, and then the remaining percentage, 20 to 25%, is still anxious. It's still there. It exists. I don't indulge it as much as I used to. It doesn't last as long. It's not as intense. The bounce back period is a lot quicker. And I would imagine the same is true for you. But I want people to hear and understand that. Do you have anything to add to that for folks listening?
Yeah, I like that you said that because I know a lot of people that, they're dating someone, initial stages of dating, and I can see where this can maybe be helpful to give you some information, but they'll give them the attachment style quiz and make a decision off the bat from that,
Yes.
and I get that that could give you some feedback in terms of, kind of what you're looking for, but you can't just write people off based off of a label. And so there's more that you want to assess. And yes, for me, obviously, I have predominantly this insecure attachment style growing up, but it was important for me. Like, I value growth and I value, just healing, and I value self help and I value therapy and I value all of these things to help me evolve into a better person. And am I taking action steps to align with that version? Yes. So I think that those are the questions too that you want to ask the people that you get into a relationship with. Is what are your values? What are you doing to align with those values? Do you actually take action to align with those values? And that's just going to be more telling and more indicative of, is this a suitable partner or
100%. Couldn't agree more. Yes. And many people will also ask, like, hey, are you in therapy? Do you know your attachment style? Just because they might not be in therapy or they might not know their attachment style, it doesn't mean that they're not aware of some of their behaviors. And there are many different paths to healing. So try not to be, for those listening, too rigid in your expectations of what someone should have done or not done. Realize that some people are self-healers and they listen to podcasts and they read books and they watch YouTube videos. Other people hire professionals. Some people do a mix of all the above. There is no one path to growing more secure. There's a lot of different entry points. The journey is winding, and it is one that lasts a lifetime. Look for indications that the person is self-aware, that they are even aware of their values. If they can't tell you their values, that might be a good indication that, especially if you are on the more anxious side of things, you might not have someone who has the depth that you desire. It doesn't make them a bad person, but it might mean that they are not aligned in the ways that you need.
Yeah,
Now, I
exactly.
want to talk about developing a secure attachment style because that's the work that we both do. Really, everything we're putting out there is helping people to understand themselves and work towards a more secure attachment style, towards the secure side of the attachment spectrum.
Yeah.
Talk to me about some things that have worked for you and what you pass along to your therapy and coaching clients.
Yeah, good question. So that's the goal, right? That's the goal, is to kind of shift from that insecure to secure way of relating to yourself and others. So I like to work with the secure self archetype. And I don't know if I ever brought this up to you necessarily, but I call it the secure self archetype. And essentially, when you think of like internal family systems,
Hmm.
there's a lot of different parts to us. Okay. And these parts can be very sabotaging in a lot of ways, but, naturally they're there to help us. The thing is, when we didn't really have a healthy model growing up, we don't really know how to take care of those parts. So we tend to be in conflict with, our anxious part. We tend to be in conflict with our self critical part, right? There's lots of different parts to us. So, in developing your secure self, it's really just cultivating a secure part to you that can kind of help you navigate all of the challenges that come up for you. If you don't have that part to you, then you're going to have a really hard time. So in terms of cultivating your secure self, to your listeners, it's really getting clear on, again, okay, what are your values? What are your relationship values? Is it that you value growth, that you value compassion, kindness, partnership? So getting really clear on that blueprint for you. What Chris talks about so much is the needs. What are your relationship needs? Getting clear on that. Connecting to your feelings, learning how to really sit still with your feelings. As anxious attachers, we're super impulsive when we're feeling any kind of discomfort. So really learning, some somatic practices, self-regulation to just sit before reacting. Sit before reacting. Learning how to fill your own void, right? So creating a support system, hobbies that you like, creating a community of people that you like, people that can support you, just learning how to become more of a whole person in that sense. Yeah. And a lot of that too comes with self-compassion. When you think of your secure self, that's a really compassionate and accepting, flexible part of you. So that part of you is really going to come in handy, throughout this year of just grieving. She's really come in handy in terms of like how I talk to myself. I soothe myself from that secure version of me where I'll put my hand on my heart and I'll just say really loving things to myself, like, hey, Jess, you're going to be okay. I got you. I support you. I mean, it is the most compassionate, loving part of you. And I think it's important to cultivate that within you if you haven't done so yet.
That's so powerful for people to hear. And I love IFS and parts work because of this. There is a secure part to everyone. You're not just anxious. No one is 100% an anxious attacher or disorganized attacher or any kind of attacher. Even 100% secure, that doesn't exist either. There are degrees to all of this, and this seems to be an emerging theme from our conversation today. A lot of nuance and complexity exists within everything, and that includes you. Cultivating, as you so beautifully put, that relationship with yourself and pouring love, affection, time, energy, support, encouragement into that part of you helps to lift all of the other parts as well. Inner child work is related to this too. You're accessing versions of yourself that went through those experiences that were really hurt, that were invalidated or unsafe, that felt that unpredictability and instability that so many of us recognize from our childhoods. And I love that you said that because I think it's so important for people to realize there is that part in you already. And we can bolster and strengthen that. We can give them the lead seat at the table. They can run this committee, if
Yeah.
you will.
Yeah.
And I love that analogy because it really, I almost think of like the Knights of the Round Table or something when I hear that. Like, you're all gathering around the table, but at the end of the day, the secure self is leading the charge. They're hearing everyone out. They're saying, okay, that's a valid point. Thank you for bringing that to our attention. We'll consider that. Thank you.
Yeah,
And
exactly.
moving forward. And I love that too, because it lets people know, this is really ultimately all about listening to yourself.
100%. 100%. Yeah, the listening, the self-compassion, the self-acceptance, it's all tied in.
As we're nearing the end of our conversation today, I want to ask you anything else you feel anxious attachers listening or watching should know? Like, what is your elevator pitch for them? What's your one-liner, or what
Mm,
comes to mind when you think of anything we didn't cover today that you want them to take away from this conversation, or maybe isn't something that we
yeah,
even got to talk about today?
I feel like we covered so much good stuff, but yeah, I would just say, then rather than outsourcing so much, practice inner sourcing, because you have such a big heart. You have so much love to give. And if you can just give some of that to yourself and know that you're capable of doing that, I think it's just such a beautiful practice to, again, cultivate and develop that relationship with yourself. Anxious attachers were so used to kind of outsourcing and getting that external validation, that external reassurance, that external love. And you have so much of that within you already. So if you can just source that from within yourself, I think that's such a beautiful practice of self-love and self-trust. And something that I always like to tell, my students, my clients, people that, come work with me is get into the habit of asking yourself, what would secure me do? What would secure me do? I think that's such a good guiding system in terms of helping you realign, right, to that part of you. I even have it on my mug here to remind me every day. What would secure
That
me?
is precious. I
I
love
know.
that.
It's so, and it has my brand colors too, the purple
It
and the
does.
such a dork. But it's so, you have to remind yourself because we can get so lost. We can get so lost in the sauce. And yeah, I think it's just a kind of a good grounding question to ask yourself.
Amen. Great note to end on. One thing I'm going to link in the notes for folks listening today is a breakup guide that I have, which is actually an excerpt of a chapter from Needy No More, the book. And it's 4 tips for anxious attachers going through a breakup. Because we talked about your breakup, and I think that's kind of the theme of today too, is that relationship with yourself and rediscovering yourself. So I'm going to link that for folks. I'll create a URL. It'll be cracklift.com/breakup. I will also link that in the show notes. I would love for you to share with folks watching and listening how they can find you online, any resources that you might have available to them. How can folks discover you? Because you've got great content on Instagram and TikTok and all over. So how can people find you?
Yeah, so you can find me on Instagram, the Jessica De Silva. I don't post too much on TikTok anymore, but I think it's Jessica De Silva Coaching on TikTok. And then my website, jessicadesilvacoaching.com. Honestly, if you just go on the website, it has all the links on there. My podcast, Let's Talk Attachments podcast, one-on-one coaching, especially. I kind of work with all the attachment styles. So, if you have someone who maybe is avoidantly attached, we can work on that too. And then I have an e-course. It's the My Secure Self e-course. So that's available as well.
JessicaDeSilvaCoaching.com.
Yep.
Great. Fabulous.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Jessica. This has been a wonderful conversation. I knew that it would be. Very first guest episode in the books. And I'm so happy that we got to share that milestone together. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Chris. And I just wanted to say, I love your compassionate approach to this. When you speak, it feels very encouraging, very warm. And so I'm just very grateful for you and for this opportunity.